I'm Barb Maurais, and Mainely Ticks is our family business. And Bob, I'll let you
Sure.
talk about how we got into that.
Sure. Back in 2004, my brother Ed and I were at a wedding of a niece, and at that time, one of our nephews was working for a pest management professional in Connecticut. As you know, their ticks were even more prevalent down in that area. In fact, Lyme disease comes from Lyme, Connecticut. And my nephew Jonathan kind of enticed my brother Ed to say, hey, Ed was looking for a change in career, and he said, somebody in the state of Maine ought to think about spraying for ticks, because when we first were on the scene back in 2005, we were really the only game in town in terms of being able to treat residential properties to reduce the number of ticks. So when my brother Ed asked Barb and I to be involved in this, we both agreed with a little caveat that, yeah, we would love to do this if you would allow us to establish an educational presence, because we're both teachers. So education is the root of who we are. And Barb was a reading specialist, and I was a shop teacher for 31 years. So when Ed said, that might make for a nice combination. Ed loves to be out in the field exterminating, and Bob love to be inside educating. So it was really a nice blend of talents. And so for 18 years now, we've been treating residential properties for ticks and protecting folks that help them to reduce tick encounters.
Great.
Yeah, and that first year, we spent our February vacation building the educational website. When I went online to learn about ticks, because we knew nothing, there was information all over the place. Immediately, we decided that we were going to do research-based and make sure that everything we had was able to be cited. And I can remember when I was working on our homepage, I wrote, "You may have Lyme disease and not even know it." And little did I know that I was talking about myself. I had arthritis issues. My doc couldn't get a handle on what was going on with me, and we did our first educational seminar that summer in 2005, had some experts come and speak with us, and as they're talking about what that could look like, I realized that I had not only Lyme, but several tick-borne diseases. So that increased my interest in learning more about ticks. Over the years, we've sponsored workshops, seminars. We've been at the Maine Flower Show and done talks. We've been at Lyme conferences, and Bob was even an honorary doctor of the day at the osteopathic state conference one year, because our family doc felt that the information that we had was important for people to have. And then I also became involved in a nonprofit Lyme support group we incorporated, and also have been involved on the state level legislating through our local legislative suite 10, 11 years ago, so that the May is Lyme Awareness Month is an example of one piece of legislation that we were able to work with other Lyme advocates throughout the state.
You had mentioned your website. What's the web address?
The web address is mainlyticks.com. So it's mainlyticks.com.
In there they can learn.
Yep, we have educational materials, we have resources, we have sections on tick-borne diseases, and not only Lyme disease, but several of the other diseases. And in our resource section, we include Maine CDC and other recognized experts in Lyme, and we'll talk more about that
Great.
later. Thank you.
So which ticks are active right now?
Well, you're a hunter, as you were telling us, and those of us that are out in the woods or even in the backyards need to be looking out right now for the adult female deer tick. They are in the questing mode. They're looking for their third and final blood meal. They are much easier to spot than the tiny larval ticks, which are also active right now. This would be a good time for me to just take just a few minutes to talk about the life cycle of the tick, because it would really blend why we're seeing different ticks at different times.
This is like a good topic for Halloween.
Well, just so people will start, creeping out, but
Yeah.
the ticks are here. The reality of it is, ticks are here. And we find that a lot of us now live in these developments that are bordered by the woods, and we live in tick habitat. And so it's important for folks to understand this 2-year life cycle. And in fact, the 2-year life cycle is one of the resources that is available on our website. There's a nice graphic that goes along with it, and a nice narrative that will explain a little bit better too in terms of what that is. But if we start off with the 2-year life cycle, we need to recognize that a tick, the deer tick that we're talking about tonight, needs 3 blood meals in order for it to survive. So we'll start at the very early stage in the month of May, where the adult female deer tick is laying up to 3,000 eggs. Okay, so if you can think of deer ticks surrounding your property, if there happen to be adult female deer ticks that are ready to lay eggs, they're apt to lay between 2,000 and 3,000 eggs. Those eggs in our area will hatch in the August time frame. So think of the 2,000 to 3,000 little larval ticks now. They're looking for their first blood meal. That first blood meal typically will come from a rodent, be for a chipmunk, a mouse, or a bird. But this is the point in which the ticks will acquire the disease agent, the pathogen. Mice, white-footed mouse, are extremely competent reservoir hosts for the Borrelia burgdorferi bacteria, which is the Lyme disease bacteria, and other co-infections as well. Ehrlichiosis, babesiosis, are a cocktail of pathogens that these little white-footed mice can harbor. So here's this little tiny larval tick, about the size of a period. If it finds an active host, that mouse or that chipmunk, it successfully acquires that first blood meal. It's then going to chill out. It's going to overwinter. And it's going to molt into what's called an eight-legged nymph. In the spring, April, May, June, July, and August, this is now the same tick, but now it is looking for its second blood meal. That second blood meal could again be a rodent, could be a mouse, could be a chipmunk, could be your child, could be your grandchild, could be yourself. It doesn't care. It's looking for a blood meal. So if your children are out playing barefoot, or if you're out on all fours gardening, you could be that second blood meal. If that nymph tick is successful with acquiring that second blood meal, in about 4 or 5 months' time, it molts to the adult tick. The adult deer tick, which is now active in our area, is looking for that third and final blood meal. But again, understand that that tick at that point in time has already had 2 blood meals. It's already had 2 opportunities to acquire the pathogen, the disease agent, from an infected rodent.
If the nymph tick gets you, can it spread the disease to you?
Yes.
Yes.
Because
So
it's already had that
One
blood
meal, okay.
once it becomes infected once, it can then pass on in the process of its acquiring. So the larval tick, if that first blood meal, if it acquired the disease agent from that first blood meal, when it's attached to whatever it is on the second blood meal, if it's yourself or a child, it, in the process of feeding for that second blood meal, is passing the disease agent on to you. So now with the adult female deer tick, the one that we're most concerned about right now, it's had 2 blood meals, so it's had 2 opportunities to become infected. So therein lies the fact that, we need to take this seriously. Unfortunately, so many people in our area think that ticks are a summer phenomenon. We don't have to worry about them when we go into the fall or the winter, which is not true. Peak time for the adult female deer tick is now, is the fall. This is when they're active. And take a look at our outside temperatures recently. They're mild. Ticks are out questing. The adults are out questing. They're looking for that 3rd and final blood meal.
Jeez, makes me scared to go hunting this weekend.
Well, no, it's not that you want to be scared, you want to be prepared.
Okay.
And you want to have your awareness and understand why you need to take precautions. Also, the size of the ticks is really important. We have a graphic, and you're not going to be able to see it here, but we have a poppy seed and we have sesame seeds. Patrick thought perhaps we had brought ticks with us, but it's representative of the size. So the adult female deer tick, which is, as Bob said, is active right now, is only the size of a poppy seed. And then the nymph ticks are sesame seed. And then the larvae ticks, which if you had said, like, people who go turkey hunting and they sit down and they've got this nice bed of wet, moist leaves underneath them, that's where the larval ticks may be as they're waiting to overwinter. And they're about the size of a period at the end of a sentence. So they're extremely small, and as you noted, they're numerous.
Yeah. How do deer ticks find a host?
Deer ticks, they've been around for hundreds of years, and they can sense movement, they can sense the carbon dioxide, and if you happen to be recreating or working in tick habitat, they're just genetically designed to look for a blood meal. So you or it, or the chipmunk, or the mouse, or the bird. So they've evolved over hundreds of years, and it's one of these issues that, particularly with the deer tick, they are now established. We're now looking at the Lone Star tick, which is not yet established here in the state of Maine. But when it is established in the state of Maine, people are going to find the Lone Star tick to be a bigger problem because they are more aggressive. They would actually follow a host, whereas the adult female deer tick will what's called questing. They'll usually attach to a blade of grass, and their 2 front feelers will wait until something comes by, and they have little hooks on the end of those, and they'll attach. So they're more passive in that questing, whereas the Lone Star tick is more aggressive. Another fun fact.
Yeah, my father-in-law, John, he like way back when my wife was in high school, I think. She went out to visit a friend out in San Antonio, and she came back and flew back, and they think that maybe like a Lone Star tick was in her suitcase, and then John got arliculosis, and they think that it probably came from the suitcase that she had with her. So that's a questing tick.
It is
right there.
The Lone Star tick is the alpha-gal, the disease agent. You probably heard of the meat allergies.
Yeah.
Where if you're bitten by a Lone Star tick, you could possibly acquire that alpha-gal, which you wouldn't be able to eat meat.
This one got itself on an airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, as the tick is questing and it grabs onto that host, so as Bob had said, it could be a rodent, it could be, in the case of the adult female, they prefer larger mammals, so a deer, which is, even though it's called a deer tick, the deer do not transmit the disease agents. They're simply a large animal transport, and they're a good blood meal because the ticks can feed undisturbed. But after they quest and they grab hold to, if they're on me, they're going to go up. So as they go up, they're looking for a place where they'll be undisturbed and they can attach. So that's why when you talk about wearing the long pants, and, tucking your pants into your socks and having light-colored clothes, it's so that you have a better chance of seeing the ticks. But they typically would attach either between the toes, behind your knee, belly buttons, back of your back, down any place where there's a fold of skin where they can feed undisturbed. And they're a very efficient feeding machine in that they will find their area, they will secrete an anesthetic so that you don't feel, it's not like a mosquito where you feel that bite. So they put the anesthetic in, and then they secrete a cement so that they can feed undisturbed and be anchored. And then they insert their mouth part, and they use a suck and spit technique, which is the contents of their gut come up, come out, come into you, and then they pull it back. So it's not a single bite. It's over a period of time, which could be days, that they feed as they're undisturbed. And then I know that you've seen engorged ticks, and I never can look at raisinets again in the same way, because that's basically what the adult females will look like after they fed.
I can eat some raisinets
Yeah.
after this.
Well, I should have brought some.
I should be okay.
Sitting here. And then after they are fully engorged, or if they've been disturbed, they'll drop off, and then they will,
That's where the cycle begins
the
again.
cycle begins again.
Is that
And
when
Bob-
they lay their eggs or something?
In the month of, early again, and usually in the month of May in our time frame, in our geographic area.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
So they just hang
Hang
out
out.
and gorged in blood during the winter
yeah.
under the leaves or something, or where are they?
That's it, and so many people think that the winter coldness in the wintertime will kill them. It doesn't, because they will oftentimes prefer the leaf litter. That's why when you think about the surrounding perimeter of your home, if you're totally surrounded by leaf litter, I mean layers and layers and layers, because most of us homeowners, what are we doing now? We're raking these leaves into the perimeter. We've been doing it for years, haven't we? So they're layer and layer and layer. So if a tick is in that environment, it would have to have probably 2 solid weeks of 20 below temperatures in order for it to impact them. As soon as we have any snow cover, that insulates them. In fact, the adult female deer ticks who are not successful with obtaining a blood meal this fall, anytime the temperatures are above freezing, you'll find them out questing in the wintertime, looking for that third and final blood meal.
I like the little hand motions and everything
I know,
else. Those are really,
it's like,
yeah.
well, if we could dress up as a tick on Halloween.
So now I don't feel like I'm going to have time to hunt this year because, basically you're saying I probably shouldn't just blow the leaves to the perimeter of the yard. I should probably bag them and get rid of them too, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a point in time where as a homeowner, you have to define a tick-safer zone.
Yeah.
Every property is going to have a part of that perimeter where you're going to have leaves. If you've got a well-maintained lawn and you mow it and you keep it mowed, which is one of the things that you want to be doing.
Yeah, I don't have one of those.
So if you have a nice lawn, for
You don't
those
have
folks
grass,
that
or
do,
you don't mow it.
My father-in-law went to Florida in early October, so no one's mowing the lawn.
Okay.
so it's knowing your property.
Well, and the other thing is if you still want to compost your leaves, you can do that, but you just need to be aware that you may have ticks in that dark, moist, protected area, and
Oh, I'm burning everything now.
make sure you get your burning permit.
Exactly.
Officer.
Exactly. So, can you explain how to do a thorough tick check?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, here's the thing, when you ask people if they've done a tick check, subconsciously they're looking for the larger dog tick. More often than not, people are subconsciously looking for the larger tick. I mean, we've shown you tonight that the poppy seed represents a nymph, and the sesame seed represents the adult. As we get older, our eyesight isn't as sharp as it used to be. So you're more apt to feel any of these ticks on you than you are to see them. Case in point, favorite attachment point for ticks, behind the ears.
Oh yeah, that's where I always find them.
Why up in here? Because if you're dressed the way that I am, with long pants, long sleeve shirt, Barb mentioned that the ticks are gonna crawl, they're gonna crawl. This is probably where they're going to attach in the way that I'm dressed. In the summertime, when your children are playing outside with shorts and short sleeve shirts and no shoes, look to the lower extremities perhaps for where those ticks might be attached. And again, in the summertime, it's the nymph tick. So how are you gonna find the nymph tick? The way to do a personal full body tick check is to use the sensitivity of your fingertips, starting at your head and feeling behind your ears, because you can't see there, feeling well behind your neck, and starting at the very top and working all the way down, underarms, the belly button area, the groin area, behind the knees, between the toes. If you've been playing outdoors without shoes, look between the toes. That's a favorite place for the nymph tick. And don't forget pets, pets as well. If these larval ticks and nymph ticks are out in your area, check the pads of the animals that you have coming into your home, even if you're treating them orally or topically. So the tick check takes more than just, no ticks on me.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were first talking about it that I was going to have to put on my glasses to do this, but that's not the.
No, but if you're.
Feel yourself
Yeah,
then.
yeah. And if you feel a scab that hasn't been there before,
Yeah.
it's always good to have somebody else, like, just take a look and see if that scab has little legs on it.
Tell them to serve Hannah.
Right. So our granddaughter, she was 5, and she had this spot above and behind her ear, and her mom called me and said, I'm not sure what this is, because it was the wrong color for the scab, and I'm starting to itch too because I can remember it. But it was just above her ear, and we went up, and I looked at it and got the flashlight out so I could see, and it was a nymph tick, and it had attached, and it had engorged, and the sesame seed was like probably quadrupled in size. So it had been on there a fair amount of time. So we took our fine pointed tweezers, and I got it as close to the skin as possible, and steady pressure, pull, 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 for it probably was 3 or 4 minutes before it released the mouth parts. And it's like, even though we knew how small they were, you don't know until you actually, get a visual and see it. So it was like, whoa.
What do you do with it afterwards if you get a tick like that?
There are a few things that you can do. We have the University of Maine Cooperative Extension Tick Lab up at Orono, and Jim Dill and his son Griffin Dill run that lab. You can send a tick in for testing.
Like USPS?
They've got specific on their website. That's part of our resources on the Mainely Ticks website. And for $15, they will test it to see for several pathogens. There's another one that is really cool, and we'll circle around with this, but the University of Rhode Island Tick Encounter has a tick spotter service where you go to their website and you send a photo of your tick, and they give you criteria, and they'll identify it for you. They also will tell you approximately how engorged, how long it had been attached, and they will give you that information so that you can make a better decision on what you do.
That's free of charge.
Yes, yeah, the identification is free of charge.
Does it cost to send it up to the tick lab in Orono, or?
They're not taking ticks for ID right now.
They will ID, but not for pathogen analysis. They're set up for the, to analyze the disease agents, and for $15, it's, again, it would be peace of mind if you've removed an engorged tick, it's large, and you're wondering, gee, what should my next step be? First of all, circle the date on the calendar so you remember the day that you did it. Because as busy as we are in our lives, geez, was it last week I pulled this tick off of me?
I sat next to Jim Dill on a bus once. Jim and I served in the legislature together for 8 years. He was a state senator up in Orono, and Jim's into the bed bugs too. So we were on a bus. I think that we were out there on the potato tour, the blueberry tour, and we were staying in hotels and stuff like that up there. And he told me
He's checking.
all
Yeah.
about the bed bugs
Yeah.
and everything else, which made it hard to stay in the hotels.
No, you put your suitcase in the bathtub on that one. He
So
has
now
a-
I'm not
he has
gonna be
a
able-
video.
No, I'm
There's a
not gonna-
video. I'll send you the link.
Now I'm not going to be able to go in the woods. I'm not going to be able to go in hotels. What am I doing to
gosh.
myself here?
Yeah.
What's the proper way to remove an attached tick? You had already talked about that a little bit, Barb, but is there any more information there?
I think the most important thing is, and unfortunately, most people don't have fine pointed tweezers.
Yeah.
A lot of people have the eyebrow tweezers, which are fairly large at the end.
Yeah.
Because what'll happen is, if it's an engorged tick, like Barb was mentioning, the nymph tick is so tiny that if you were to try to grab that with a regular pair of tweezers, you're inadvertently going to squish the tick as you're pulling it up. And so what's happening is, as Barb mentioned, the disease agents are in the midgut of the ticks.
Oh.
And if you're squishing the tick to remove it, you're actually
You're injecting.
Pushing it all
Yeah.
injecting the disease. So
Yeah.
with the fine pointed tweezers, you can actually grab as close to the hypostome, which is the mouth part, as close to the skin as it's attached, and as Bob said, just a steady pressure coming up. It could be a little bit of time before that hypostome is barbed like a fishhook. It doesn't want to release. And as Barb said, it secretes a cement as well. This doesn't want to let go. So the fine pointed tweezers is really the right way. People will say, look, we've got these little tick spoons that we've gotten over the years that have the little V notch.
Yeah, I was going to
on them.
ask about those.
Those will work just fine if the tick is attached to a point where you have clear access to them. But if that nymph tick is attached behind the ear, that spoon isn't going to do you any good.
Yeah.
If that nymph tick is embedded in the belly button. So the best.
You also
tool-
see one that's like a flat thing with just like kind of like a little
Yes,
V notch in
a
it,
little
and little
Yeah,
round.
with the V notch.
Yeah, but like
And
you're
again,
saying,
where if it happens to be right here,
You can
you're
get it, yeah.
you can get it.
Sure.
so you have to use the tweezers in
That's
that
the
instance.
best tool to
Yeah.
use, rather than, as some people have in the past, a lip match, trying to get it off, or smothering it in Vaseline. And as Barb and I have been told on a number of occasions, what would your first reaction be if someone put a blowtorch to your butt?
Oh, yeah, it would be to
Yeah,
Would
you're
be
going,
that
yeah,
happy,
you're
right?
not gonna
point the
back
other
into
direction.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you do not want to aggravate the tick, because an aggravated tick will regurgitate the contents of its stomach. And I have
So you
seen-
should sing to them when you take
Oh,
them.
yes, you should be pleasant to them. I've seen over the years, there's a social media thing where the nurse said that you take the cotton ball and you put lotion on it, or you do whatever. No, that does not, it doesn't smother the tick the way that you can't smother them. So you just want to clearly, and don't use your fingers, because as Bob said, you're giving a good dose of whatever the pathogen is.
They're pretty hardy little creatures. Like, I know when I've like got them off my body and stuff like that, you put them in a plastic bag and you're like, I'm gonna squish you. Like, they don't squish very
No,
easy.
you
They're
have to use a Leatherman.
Yeah, they're
Or rocks.
rocks. They're
to do
they're
that.
tough little
Yeah.
little creatures.
Yeah.
What can we do to make our properties less attractive to ticks?
Well, I think probably the first thing, we've already mentioned, that is trying to keep your lawn fairly well maintained. It's amazing the number of properties that we visit for customers that will call for an estimate. And when we kind of look at the property, and we're kind of hesitant to walk the properties because they're so overgrown, or there's just so very dense vegetation. If you have deciduous canopy, you have a lot of shade and very little sunlight onto your property, that's apt to encourage, the tick activity. So basically, the first thing, as we've mentioned, is identify the tick habitat on your property. You're going to have a perimeter at some point. Where is that perimeter? And what are you doing to educate those people that live in your household? To say, hey, kids are kids, if they're playing wiffle ball in the backyard, the ball goes in the woods, they're going to chase it, right? But if you can define a tick-safer zone that you know is less susceptible to tick activity, and then just making people aware of that. So on the property, keeping your lawn mowed. If you're mulching at all, particularly in the spring, recognize that if you're buying bulk mulch, you could be importing dog ticks onto your property. We've had a number of occasions where customers of ours, after we've applied and treated their property, would call within a couple of weeks of the application and say, Bob, all of a sudden we're finding dog ticks on the property. I knew the property well enough to say, have you brought in any mulch recently? Yeah, we have. How'd you know? And that was the source of the tick.
I'm a little terrified of the mulch. Like, I watched a building burn down because they had mulched so heavily and everything. I think that it ended up combusting, and so I'm a little scared of the mulch.
Look at your property. You need to find those areas that have high ambient humidity levels, because the deer tick requires about 90% and higher of ambient humidity in order to survive. So think about it. If your children's play set is out in the middle of the lawn with a lot of sunlight, deer ticks can't survive in that environment. If you happen to have low ground cover on your property, like Pachysandra, or you have a dense vegetation of mulch that's really, really deep in the shady area, you see little chipmunks running around your property, guess what? They harbor ticks and they move ticks as well. So knowing your property...
Like a tick bus.
Yeah. Or tick world.
Tickmobile.
Yeah.
Right there.
So just being aware of on your property, where are the safest places for your kids and for your pets? Again, don't forget about the pets. So many of the issues that we have with homeowners usually are from folks with companion animals that have no idea where their animals go. They let the cats out in the morning and they come in for lunch. Well, where has that cat been? You really don't know. If you have a dog,
giving ticks rides all over the neighborhood.
Yeah.
If you have a dog, if it's confined to a pen or on a run or an invisible fence, someplace that you have some control over the habitat in which they're also visiting. So it's knowing your environment around your home, and then understanding the fact that we're a very mobile society. I've always impressed upon all of our customers that I can treat your property, Patrick, but you're going to have a barbecue over at your neighbors or someone across town and their property isn't being treated. Just understand the dynamics of you're not spending 100% of your time on the property that we treat. So be aware of the fact that, if you're golfing, you hit the ball in the rough, you've chased that ball. Your children are at an activity on a playground or at a softball field that is bordered by the wooded edge. Understand that those are occasions when you all come back home, you do that thorough tick check.
Geez, we'd all be best to trade Maine for Arizona, but then we'd have the scorpions and all that other stuff.
Yeah, and another thing to just be aware of, and again, it's increasing your awareness. If you take your dog for walks and you go down the road and the dog steps out into the tall grass on the edge to do their business, they've just entered prime tick territory.
Oh, I got the hound dogs. Like, my dogs,
gosh, your
they like to
dogs
be
are-
sniffing everything, so they don't just stay in the middle of the pavement.
Right,
They're,
they will not behave.
Yes.
They go to the edges, so they're likely to be in areas where the ticks are.
no more dogs.
Area, well, no, we're not extreme. It's increasing the awareness, not like eliminating everything. If you have a rock wall, you will have rodents in that rock wall. If you have rodents in that rock wall, you probably have ticks. And if you think about most of the rock walls that I have seen, at least on one side, whether it's toward your house or toward the woods, you know that there's leaf litter there. So that's another environment that you just need to be aware of, that's where ticks may be. So.
Dr. Tom Mather, Bob mentioned the University of Rhode Island.
Tell the story.
Excellent website. In 2015, Dr. Mather visited Barb and I spent some time with him at the Wells Estuarine Reserve in Wells, Maine. Dr. Mather collects between 13 and 15,000 ticks a year for experiments and research. So there was this one sunny day, it was November the 15th of 2015, and he said, Bob, you want to join me on a walk? We're just going to walk the perimeter of the Wells Reserve. I said, absolutely. So we park our cars, and Tom got his outfit on, and I tucked my pant leg into my socks. And within 10 feet of leaving our vehicles, Tom says, you see that right there, Bob? I said, what are you looking at, Tom? He said, see those 3 ticks? I said, Tom, where? He bends down, he picks up this little, there were 3 adult female deer ticks on this. I said, you saw those? He said, yeah, absolutely. Make a long story short, in 68 minutes, we collected 125 adult female deer ticks in about a 300-yard area just walking the perimeter. Tom saw 120 of these 125 ticks. I accounted for all of 5 of them. Amazing. But to an average person looking at that habitat, you would have seen any ticks there. You'd have assumed, hey, I'm going for a walk. I haven't got much to worry about.
I'm glad I don't have his eyes.
Oh, yeah.
But they're there. That's the thing. And most people don't realize that the ticks are there. We just need to, it's that shift in thinking. We just need to be aware of the fact that just as if we wouldn't spend a whole day on the beach without sunscreen in the summertime, because we know what would happen if we did, our thinking process now has to be, we can't spend all this time outdoor in tick habitat without taking precautions.
Great. So we can take precautions.
Absolutely, without getting rid of all the dogs, yes.
Okay. So what personal protection strategies can be used to reduce tick encounters?
Well, we suggest that you use EPA-approved repellent. At least 23% DEET is on the list. I've got a couple of examples here. Deepwood's off. And when you look at the percentage, active DEET, 25%. This works. So something that is not, and you can see where I got that at Martin's. Many places have personal protections. In fact,
You love the Margins.
yeah, I do. But I didn't, that was a find, because usually they don't have repellents. Picaridin, did we bring it?
No.
Okay. So picaridin is another approved. And again, these are designed for skin. So I have seen, and I used to do it, I would take my hat and I would spray the DEET on my hat.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It's designed for skin contact. So repellent on your skin,
Exposed skin.
exposed skin.
I always get worried the repellent's gonna wreck my sunglasses.
It could, so don't touch plastic.
25% you'd be okay. It's when you
Yeah,
go to
it's
100% DEET.
Yeah,
It starts melting the
That starts
sunglasses.
melting.
yeah, it bonds your hand to fish poles too. I don't know why I might know that fact, but
I never get the DEET stuff. I probably should. Like, I always get like the stuff that like sort of purports to be more natural. So like the citronella scented stuff. And does that actually work? The citronella stuff? Like, I think it's like called Naturapel or something like that.
well, some of these, the essential oils,
Yeah.
will work. The problem is the duration.
Yeah.
In order for them to be effective, you would have to reapply every 15 minutes, every half hour, every hour, whereas the DEET seems to work for 4 to 6 hours. And again, I like research-based,
Yeah.
and anecdotally, people have said, oh, Avon Skin So Soft works for me. We don't endorse that because I have not seen studies on the efficacy of it and whether it works on several people. Or you had mentioned before that you rarely have ticks on you, whereas other people seem to be tick magnets.
Yeah.
And again, as Bob had said, they're attracted to this carbon dioxide.
I probably don't create carbon dioxide.
Are you breathing, right?
So
Okay.
I mean, this gets into another thing. So I'm gonna go hunting, right?
Yes.
And like, though I love the smell of DEET like any other time of year, like I know deer aren't gonna come anywhere near me if I'm out there stinking like DEET. So what should I do?
Well, there are unscented repellents. I saw some tonight. And they are made specifically for hunters. And usually if you check in the sporting goods or the camping section of your local store, they would have it. CVS, I know, has had it in the past.
Great,
So-
now I have to run to Walmart now because you just told everybody.
No, they had one up on the very, very top shelf, and I got the last one on the bottom, which has a new home, so that you can go hunting. But the other thing that you can do is you can treat your clothing. And this stuff is 0.5% permethrin, and it is a clothing repellent, and it's a barrier repellent. Bob has, do you have your?
Yeah, we happen to have, most of our employees will actually have these professionally treated. We send our slacks and our shirts down to North Carolina. They professionally treat the clothing, and by doing that, it's a more thorough application, both inside and out. And it's like $8 per garment to do the shirt, $8 for the pants. We buy the socks that are already treated, so that if we're in tick habitat, we know that we've added that level of protection.
It sounds like we're always in tick habitat, though.
Yeah, we are.
We are.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
So how long does that last, though? So, like, you get your clothes professionally treated, how?
Right. The marketing of the professionally treated is such that it says that it's basically good for the life of the clothing. It says 70 washings. Now, I'm not going to, this shirt isn't going to last 70 washings. But I have my clothing professionally treated every spring before tick season, where I'm going to be in that tick habitat. Barbara, if you're treating at home?
So if you're treating at home, you can buy the odorless permethrin, so it's unscented, there's no scent to it. You need, you can do clothing, you can do gear. It's also good for tents because it repels ticks, mosquitoes, and chiggers, which, thank goodness, we don't yet have chiggers up here. They're down south.
What's a chigger?
They're a nasty biting insect that is gross. South Carolina has them, Georgia, down there. So we're not going to talk about those. But what you do is you take your clothing that you want to treat outside, and you follow directions on the can. You saturate the clothing, spray it on. This is, how many, 18 ounces. It says it will treat 4 outfits. And it was under $11, just under $11 for this. But you saturate the clothing, and then you hang it up to dry. After that first side has dried, I turn it either inside or outside out, so that I can treat the other part of the clothing just in case it didn't completely saturate, particularly if you're going hunting. I would spend the extra time, or when it's still damp, just flip it inside out and then respray it. Hang it up to dry. I will tell you that when the permethrin is wet, when it's wet, it's toxic to cats. So, and it also recommends that you are in a well-ventilated area. You follow all the precautions on the label. Once it's dried, it bonds to the fabric, and when ticks go to climb up, the contact, eventually it will kill them. So it acts as a contact insecticide, and it becomes a barrier for you. This is slated, I didn't read the directions, but usually it's 6 to 8 weeks or 6 to 8 washings. So those clothes that you treated 3 years ago, you need to retreat.
Because I treated them 3 years ago, but.
Yeah, so, because it's, and even with the insect shield, I'm not sure, duration at some point.
But one of these will get you like through the hunting season.
Oh, gosh,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. And the other thing is I would hardly recommend having a pair of specific hunting socks and treat those, because when you look at the weave of the socks, and then you look at the size of the tick, the socks are not a clothing barrier for the ticks to go through, because they'll fit through the weave of the sock, which the first time, we have a graphic that we used a few years ago that showed, okay, here's a blown up view of the sock material, And then you looked at the size of the tick and you realized that the sock was not a barrier.
So if you can get a poppy seed through it, then
Yes, yes, so go get your poppy seeds and check your socks. There are some socks that are designed to be really, really, really tight woven. But I'm not sure that I would be able to find those or stand wearing them, so,
I buy really expensive socks for hunting.
yeah. Yeah, so if you just treat one pair, and in the summertime, I actually treat a set of clothing, and because when I garden, which is a high-risk activity, I wear shorts, and I know that I'm taking a risk, so what do? I put DEET on my legs, so that, again, I'm creating obstacles to the ticks, so that I know that they're around, but they don't need to be with me. And not only a daily tick check, but if you know, like if you've gone and dumped a load of leaves out through, do that check. And in your scalp particularly, you want to be checking that as well. I was at Pondicherry one year at a camporee, and in Bridgeton, it's a hotbed for deer ticks, in particularly because there was a lot of wooded area there. It just was prime country. And I was standing there talking with some of the leaders, and they're like, "What are you doing, Barb?" Because as I'm standing there, I'm like going through my hair, and I had 2 deer ticks that were climbing through, and the gals had never actually seen, like, here's one in the wild.
Oh, jeez.
And it was like, okay, this is why you do this.
So you were glad you found it.
Oh,
so
yeah,
that you
I
could,
was very
use it
glad.
as an example.
And I think that the part that is troubling to me is, like, I'm glad that I find the ticks, but then it makes me wonder which ones did I miss. So, and when I got bit, I have no recollection of a tick bite. Did not have a bullseye rash, and last year, what was it, 49% of the reported Lyme disease cases in Maine had the bullseye rash. That meant that over half, or about half, did not have the rash.
A lot of people probably don't see the rash, though, right? So, like, you might, if you get bit on your back and you're not looking at your back,
Or if
I mean,
it was
I don't
in your scalp, you wouldn't see it either.
check out my back
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah, so if any of you do have a bullseye rash, you have Lyme disease and you need to seek treatment for it. I'm going to morph over into a little bit. It's important for people to understand that there are 2 standards of care. We have the infectious disease docs who believe that Lyme is easy to identify and easy to treat, and they have a specific protocol. Typically, it's 14 days to 21 days of doxycycline. And then you have the ILADS group, which are the International Lyme and Associated Disease Society, which believe that Lyme is a little bit more complex. And we also need to be remembering that it's, as Bob had mentioned earlier, it's not just Lyme disease. There are additional co-infections that all can be transmitted by that same tick bite. And in my case, I had Bartonella and I had Babesia. And Babesia is a protozoan, so I had to go on, it was a malaria-like treatment. I had to go on Meprin because the doxy it does not touch that. So when you go to the doctor, understand that, you might have Lyme disease, but you also might have additional diseases which require different or additional treatments, and it may not be a short course.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's best to get the ticks off of you and not get the Lyme disease in
Exactly.
the first
Yeah,
place.
if you can get ahead of
The
it.
best prescription is prevention.
Yeah.
Cool. Can you tell us about your Be Ready for Ticks partnership with Tick Encounter?
Sure, yeah, the Be Ready for Ticks, I happen to have the little sign with us tonight, just as a sample. What we've done is we're looking to make people aware that maybe out hiking on trails, and like we have some trails here in town. We have them in Lippman Park, Dundee Park, and so forth. And is it
East Wyndham
East
and,
Wyndham.
Black Brook.
Black Brook Preserve. So if people are out and enjoying the trail, there's a QR code that you can take. Most people now have their smartphones. If you scan the QR code, it would provide you with some details of, all right, you're about to hike on the trail. Here are some recommendations to keep yourself tick safe. What happens if you return home and you happen to have an attached tick? So it's a partnership between Mainely Ticks and Tick Encounter, which is trying again to raise the level of education and awareness. And this is what Barb and I, this is our passion. We want knowing what Barb went through and seeing what a lot of our tick customers have gone through. It's really imperative upon us to help the communities recognize that ticks aren't going away, but there are certain things, short of having anyone come to treat my property, there are a number of precautions that we can take as a family to lower the risk of our having a tick encounter. And so the Be Ready for Ticks initiative was one of the initiatives, and the other was the Tick Spotters, as Bob already mentioned, that if this fall you happen to remove an attached tick, take a picture of that tick, go to our website, go to Tick Encounter. And again, Tick Encounter is such a good educational website. Whereas we have tick identification cards that show what the ticks look like if they've not been fed, Tick Encounter has this amazing graphic that shows the tick from day 1 to day 7. If it's been attached to you for day 7, guess what? It looks like the end of my little finger. So there's a different scale, and they have a really, really strong educational process.
How did they do that? Did somebody just let them stay attached to him for that period of time?
Yes.
Yeah, and Dr. Tom Mather, when they gathered, and his research crew, and they have graduate students that work on this, they actually fed the ticks and then photographed them. You will love
They
that
fed the
website.
ticks off of themselves?
No, not
No,
off of
animals.
themselves. They would give
Oh,
them
off
a
of
blood
animals.
sample.
Oh,
They would
I was
give-
like, I couldn't imagine.
No,
like,
not on
okay, day
yourself.
1.
No, yeah, day 1, but they marked, they tabulated what the
Excellent
what the
source.
engorgement
Excellent
was.
resource. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll have to check that out. Maybe after hunting season.
yeah, don't look now, or
Don't look
or
now.
maybe look now and then you'll go, oh, this was a 2-day attachment.
Point of interest for you, Patrick, and other hunters, is the moose hunting season over now?
I think there's one
I think
more.
there might be one more hunt. There's typically 3 hunts, I think.
Well, interesting tidbit that I think you'll appreciate the fact that we don't see them down here, but it's called the winter tick, the moose tick.
Oh yeah, I've seen them before.
Whereas we're talking about the 3-host tick, where we said that the deer tick has to have 3 blood meals. Well, these little winter ticks, they're so tiny, but they'll attach onto the moose. It's a 1-host tick. They actually molt through the 3 different levels while on that moose. And there could be tens of thousands, up to 100,000 of these ticks on that moose, and they'll kill the moose.
It's
They
gross.
become
It's like
endemic.
they're like scales
It
on
is.
them. It's
It is.
the most disgusting thing.
And they were saying on the news last spring that 90% of the calf population that they targeted and tagged
In
didn't
3
survive.
of the
It was
counties.
just
Um,
phenomenal.
The mortality rate was incredible. But people are like, yeah, the moose tick is not going, like if you went moose hunting, the moose tick is not going to be seeking us as a host, because they've already got their lifetime
Supply.
ticket.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, I mean,
That's like one I never like to think about just because it's so gross. So what tick resources are available to our community? What are the other resources outside of the ones that you've already talked about? Or are those pretty much the resources?
Well, I
right
think
there?
we encourage folks, everyone has internet connection today. And again, we'll find if people visit the Mainely Ticks website, I think they'll be impressed by the fact that we're not looking to sell services. We will have, if someone wants information on acquiring an estimate, yes, but 95% of the website is dedicated to trying to educate people. And you'll come away with that once you spend a little bit of time. When I say a little bit of time, there are so many resources on our website. From the 2-year life cycle graphic that I explained, that's all available for people to be able to see and read in detail, to a lot of the links that Barb has mentioned, the IDSA with the 2 standards of care and ILADS, There are lots of information there in terms of if you've just removed that tick and you want to send it to the University of Maine Cooperative Extension Service, there's a link to that lab to tell you in detail what you need to do to submit that tick. So spend some time. And another thing that Barb and I would highly encourage folks in the community is we've delivered scores of educational talks throughout the state. And we're very willing to meet with local groups to put on an educational talk, to talk a lot about what we've done tonight. To just better educate communities. If you're a municipal worker, if you're a scout leader, we have lots of resources to be able to share. We have tick identification cards, we have bookmarks with lots of information on it, including personal protection strategies, landscape modifications. So there's a wealth of educational information on our website.
Great. So we're about 5 minutes out. Do we have any other tick stuff we could discuss?
If I could.
If not, it's okay if we end a little early
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Oh, sort of an interesting side note, because many of us have said, well, when I was younger, there were no deer ticks.
I wanted to ask about that because people talk about the burning of fields and all that other stuff, but I don't know how much of that is,
Well, and that's what I wonder, because I can remember, like, the big event was the fire department would come and they would burn my dad's back fields. And, of course, what that did was for the dog ticks, because we didn't have deer ticks until in Lyme, Connecticut, in about 1975. There were some mysterious illnesses going through, and Lyme disease is named after. It had been in Europe for hundreds of years, and it had come over to the United States. And what we noticed, and Bob has a graphic that really shows it, is if you look at the progression of the deer tick, they basically have come north and they've come east over the last 20 years, or 40 years in that effect. And when we first started doing our tick talks, York and Cumberland County were the hotbeds, and New Hampshire also had pretty strong tick populations, but it wasn't west. And as we looked at the map and saw where the tick populations were going up, is it came up the coast and then it went in the rivers. And when you think about where the bird migrations are, and you looked at that as an overlay, that's one possibility of how and where it's spread. Unfortunately, right now, Maine is number 1.
Maine has the highest incidence of Lyme disease, and people in our generation, ages 65 and over, have the highest incidence rate within that.
And
Do you think it's because they're not prepared for it, or?
I think it's a factor of, you just mentioned when we were growing up, we didn't have to worry about it. And again, the mindset is, well, I'm not spending that much time in the woods. I don't have to be in the woods to pick up the tick. I can be right on my own property to pick up the tick. And I think a couple of other reasons, Patrick, in terms of where we see so many more today. Think about when I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s, the pervasive use of very powerful pesticides in the environment, which we no longer have. Couple that with the fact that we now live in the neighborhoods where that was deer habitat. We are in their playground. That's where we are. And so we shouldn't be surprised if we know that we live in proximity to deer. We see lots of deer behind our house, and we see rodents around our property. We have to be aware of the fact that we need to take it upon ourselves to take the precautions, because we know they're out there. We can't see them. As I learned with Dr. Tom Mather, he saw them, I didn't, but they were there. These ticks are around the perimeter of our properties if we are surrounded by that habitat. We just now need to take it upon ourselves to better protect our families.
There's nothing cute about that chipmunk at my house. Nothing.
Chipmunks.
Yeah.
He's not.
If you have one chipmunk, you have multiple
chipmunks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank you both for being here
Thank
today.
you for having us.
And Mainly Ticks is your business. I'd also like to thank Brad Saucia, who's our producer today. He's back behind the glass. And thank you, Wyndham, for tuning in. Good night.